EXARC, and we are very glad that you reaction on this or our invitation, and we hope to have a very successful evening where we can talk and discuss together. But first, we have the presentation of our guests. After every presentation, there is time for discussion, of course. Please use your hands, and questions can also be asked by chat. And in the front page, I show you that is the work group with Ibrahim from Germany, Katie Weisberg from Israel, Forteni Veneri in Greece. We had a very good conference there in 2022. Eva Berkas from Hungary and myself from the Netherlands. So I think that we start with Björn, and I'd like to introduce him to you. Björn, go ahead, please.
All right, I'm thinking of going back in time to see where all this started and why we are doing what we are doing. Because I think that's a very important thing to understand why we are doing this and how we are doing it. If we go back, the museum world started for something like 130, 140 years ago in Sweden, in Skansen. And the first experimental part in Sweden was a guy called Thomas Johansson, who started the institution of ancient experimental ancient experimental archaeology. And from that, he and some other guys joined us together. We have started in a smaller bit. So we met in 1999. That's also nearly 30 years ago. And what we did was the joining together a Swedish network. And from that, Thomas and some other guys went down to meet Roland, who was on another meeting before. And that was the starting for the very beginning for the embryo to be EXARC. And so that is 26 years ago, EXARC started with all this experimental part. At the same time, we was a group very enthusiastic about everything. So we started a hell of a lot of EU projects. We were traveling around Europe every month nearly for 15, 20, 25 years. And by doing that, we then learned a lot of each other. And what happened was that we then started to make new organizations, like a Destination Marketing Association. IMTAL was an American organization who joined up in 1990. We did a number of e-books, live art and open art, which was very successful. And all this ended 50 years ago by all of us who started this thought about that we actually want to be more than just some funny people doing some ancient, interesting things. Because the rest of the world, the museum world, looked at us as, what are you think you are? I mean, that's not museum work you are working with. So that what took us all these years, up to 2011, that we could say that we are a globally open air museum, which is a fantastic thing which helped achieve lots of people who've been working with this. So that means that so what happened was that many of us started with building houses and empty houses, because you couldn't put furniture, you couldn't do anything inside it because you didn't know how it could be, etc. So that was fantasy. And so part of that was, I remember in Sweden, in Lund, Anders Urban was the first one did start with experimental archaeology at the university. And from there, suddenly the experimental part grown into Europe. And lots of these organizations in Europe were called parts. And during interesting things, but many of them were empty houses and reconstruction. When they have done that, they just stood there with nothing in it. And so suddenly this American little idea with the reenacting starting, which then was the first part with actually starting up a living history concept. So the next step was that those who did experimental art could then present it for public. So they could do it in civil codes in these areas with this museum environment. But they could also dress up in working clothes or medieval clothes, etc., and presenting all these things for the public. And so that was the next step. And the next step again was that where IMTAL came in into the whole thing, and suddenly we did the live interpretation. We did role play, and we did the experimental part, and with customs in costume, or could be also in doing first and the third person, which means you are liking or you are talking about the likings. So all these years we have been nearly working on this 40 years since this, shall we say, fantastic start with lots of organizations and lots of work. And we can say that if you look out in Europe today, many of these projects, and you know, most of you, of course, know Roland, and he was one who, together with me and a number of people more, worked with developing this concept in Europe. And it's probably to say that it's very interesting to come to this museum today to see how we now are doing. We see environment, is the quality of the houses, the quality of the experimental part, the quality of life interpretation, etc. So the only thing we need now is to work even more together, because if you're very good on experimental archaeology, it doesn't mean that you're very good on doing life interpretation. That means that if you have a house and you have a blacksmith with a blacksmith guy, and he's doing all this music, he also had to be trained. So we talk to the public, not with its back and doing all this hammering on his iron, etc. So this is I think this is a very important piece we are coming into now, that we are integrating all these 40 years of work to doing a fantastic presentation for the public, but then based on science, but also based on a true story, and also make it very interesting both for kids, school kids, and for others. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We saw a lot about your experience, and that is in fact why we are now also joining EXARC, because the story all the members of EXARC are telling, the experimental archaeology, and it's nowadays in Western Europe, and I think outside Europe as well, history is more and more interesting by people. Television programs, the famous Danish television program about history, it's slow television and it's very new, very popular, and I think the experimental archaeology and the knowledge we have as the members of EXARC that deserves more public and more telling the story. And the nice thing of experimental archaeology is that they are so close to nature. And our future nowadays is to go back to nature and to live with the nature and to love the nature instead of using it and destroying it. So for me, and I think that's a very close relation. Does anyone has a question or want to ask something about to Björn? Okay. Thank you. Then Eva, please. You were in Moscow once for an EXARC meeting.
Yes, can you hear me now?
We hear you loud and clear. And what happened there in Moscow? When was it?
I'll show a slide and then you all know. First, I'll tell a bit about what I did, because then you understand that the main thing for me is the authenticity and the investigation, and that all starts with experimental archaeology. So I'll show some work I did, and then I'll come to Korea. So for 30 years, I've been working in the experimental archaeology, and I'm a teacher in Amsterdam at the theater school, and there I'm also a conservator of the textile collection. And actually, already 30 years, I'm reconstructing clothing and baskets and all kinds of things. And my passion became prehistory and then working with plant fibers. And ever since 49, last century, I've been working in archaeology too. This was a job I did for the museum in Bolzano. It was the reconstruction of Ötzi's coat and Ötzi's shoes. And EXARC helped me with publishing about the shoes. So at their website, you can find, or in the journals, you can find an article about the shoes. And then I did some work for Gallo Romeins Museum in Belgium. And I did a lot of work with lime bark and reconstructing prehistoric shoes, a hat, a cloak. So, and here I'm demonstrating it, because after all the investigation, you're able to share it with people. And if you know what the art, so what is the most authentic way, then you can also show to the people which kind of concessions do I make to bring it to you. So that's actually, and you can go far with the Pacific to reach big audience, but always the case is the authenticity. And if I'm working with my materials on the right side, I'm working with natural, on the left side with brown bar, then I'm using my skills and the use of nature to amaze people. And with that amazement, I'll catch them. So I'm not playing a role, I'm just telling what I'm doing. And I think prehistoric people could have done it like that too. And then I think it's because I'm working with the natural fibers, I can highlight a lot of issues in modern society, like climate, the role of women, racism, whatever you can compare it to. And that's the issues that matter nowadays. In 2014, I started the reconstruction of a fish trap. The real one is in Leiden, and the reconstruction is in Archeon in the museum. And also that I made an article about, and you can find it also at EXARC journals. And then with that fish trap, they asked, EXARC was also there, and they asked me, would you come to Moscow? So there I went with my fish trap. And there I'm talking to the audience about how did I do it and explaining them. And then Wolf Hein showed up from Germany, and he said, do you want to come to Korea? And actually this Korea festival, where I go for 6 years on a row now, is a very good example how you can bring prehistoric items and experimental archaeology to the wide public. Dr. Lee An-yong is the director, and he started off this festival, and lots of countries participate. And from each country, a specialist is coming over to Korea and doing their skills. And the museum is on a huge area that's a crucial Paleolithic site. And on the field, they make these statues, so they're permanent over there, and it's like a park environment open for public. I'll skip this one. Oh, okay, it's working. This is how they all enter, and this they come running in. It's 30,000 visitors a day, and it's a huge area, but they are trying to find their spot. So they're even running in to put their picnic plate. And it started out very small, but they used a natural day, 5th of May. That's Children's Day. So they work together with that holiday for all the people, and they make very much activities for children. So here you see all the booths from all the countries, and each country has a specialism and an activity for children. And in the back, you see a huge stage, and that's also for modern K-pop artists or cultural music. This is how it's working. I'm in the front or in this in front of the table with all the stuff, and I'm doing my specialism. And students from archaeology and anthropology are helping me out. So the tables in the back is all for children activities. So I don't have to do that, and the archaeology students learn from the craft. So in this way, lots of children and parents are getting used to prehistoric, and maybe for the first time they hear about prehistoric stuff. So this is what's happening at the booth. This is the Spanish booth. They have a lot of skulls, but you don't see them. And then they can wear some clothes or furs from animals, and then they're in front of the screen. So it's a photo booth. And then you can say, now you're camouflaged, guys. And in the middle, you see a flint knapper, and then he is working in prehistoric clothing. And on the right side, you see Wolf Hein, and he is working in normal clothing. But the same thing, he is talking about his craft and interesting a lot of people. So it doesn't matter how you do it. Here I'm on a stage, and this is Spanish on stage. So one time a day on a higher stage with a microphone and a translator, of course, we do a performance about our skills. And they use a lot of ceremony and from cultural parts in Korea and the history of Korea. So they make it very big with their culture, prehistory, and modern music. And then, of course, there's a lot of food. So it's like 18 meters long barbecues, and they can get their own meat and grill it. I think it's like 20 of those barbecues. So they make a very big event. And this is how people come in. They can hire prehistoric clothing. And for us, it's like the Flintstones. But these people have their first experience with prehistoric history, and they can experience activities and talk to the experts about how it was. So the people are in a good mood, and we as specialists share our knowledge ourselves and to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you so much. You were there for 6 years, and the next 5 years you're also going?
Yes.
Is it a paid event for the people?
Yes, they pay the whole trip for me, and then we have a nice hotel. And of course, in the evenings, we go to nice restaurants, and then we can talk as experts with each other. And we get a nice community. So soon I'll be going to France and Spain to some caves because of an invitation of friends.
Is the event free for the public, or do they have to pay an entrance fee?
No, this is free for the public.
Free for public, organized. Yeah. Okay. Oh, thank you very much. And I think we'd like to introduce Ivana for your presentation. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Jack. Well, thank you for the invitation. I like to introduce myself for the people who don't know me. I've been in experimental archaeology for about 36 years already. And actually, I was one of the founders of EXARC together with Roland. I remember sitting there with Martin Schmid and talking about this idea of building something in Europe that we already had in the Netherlands at that moment. An organization working on experimental archaeology and educational archaeology. I did my PhD in functional analysis using a lot of experimental archaeology. And at the moment, I'm a deputy director of the prehistoric village in Eindhoven in the Netherlands, where I'm responsible for programming and education. And well, I also did 2 medieval months for the people who might have heard about it, but it's not what I'm talking today about. The prehistoric village, Prehistorisch Dorp, soon to be Museum Park Vonk, actually in 2 weeks. So I'm very busy expanding our museum at the moment. It's a low-key museum, highly accessible for a lot of people who are normally not going to museums but want to have an entertaining day. Well, we have about 45 seasonal staff and about 85,000 visitors and 200 volunteers. And we are, well, a traditional archaeological open air museum, I think, like Björn was talking about. So we have a basis in experimental archaeology, and authenticity is for us the main thing, since we identify ourselves as a real museum where we spread knowledge and try to do that in an entertaining but basically educational way. So we have a food fest, we have a medieval events, Roman events, and one of the longest that we work on, I think about almost 40 years now, is the Viking Fest, which is a big success. But what I would like is to shake up a little bit the whole authenticity thing, because I think it might be interesting to change it a little bit. 10 years ago, we were hosting as a film location for the movie Redbad, which was kind of a flop, and which also was not authentic at all, but had a big audience in the end, especially in Asia. Where well, the Flintstones that Eva just showed us are also very much valued, and this film was valued there as well. I was kind of a liaison between the museum and the movie makers, and it started me thinking that maybe it's more important to entertain people, to make them think about the past more, than to be always working on being authentic as possible. And after that movie, I started thinking about how to involve more people that don't regularly come to the museum, and how I could reach them. And that's when I came up with Hexia. And Hexia has been an event on the history of seeresses, Druidism, witchcraft, but it was meant for modern witches, and we were searching whether we could involve more people, not basically interested in history, but basically interested in womanhood, sisterhood, witchcraft. Well, I would like to discuss with you what you think about it, because we did it 3 years. It was very, very successful. It was sold out way in advance, 5 to 6 weeks. And still we decided to stop it. And we decided to stop it because we couldn't control what it was about anymore. So it was about, it should be about the history of witchcraft, where we could tease people to come, but also tell a lot about the facts that we know about witchcraft in the 16th and 17th century. But in the end, it turned out to be a festival of modern witches who were claiming to talk about Gaelic witchcraft, Pixies witchcraft, all kinds of witchcraft that to an historian or archaeologist not really are not authentic, or are not ancient at least, and are very much modern, modern way of thinking about witchcraft, which has no historical depth. So we stopped that, although it was very successful, because we wanted to be a museum which spreads knowledge. But last year, and that's the last thing I want to show to you, because it's kind of in levels of authenticity. But last year, my son went to work for Puy de Fou. I don't know if you know it. It's a theme park where they demonstrate a lot of shows on Vikings, on Romans, on King Arthur, and it's big, it's huge. It's not authentic at all. They don't claim to be. They claim to be telling legends and not to be a museum. They don't claim to be historically correct. By the way, on the left, it's my son. It's where he ended up in the end. Here again, this is the Colosseum. And here you see how big it is. It's 8,000 people. They have about 4 million visitors each year. So it's a really, really large theme park. And visiting this park, I was suddenly finding myself at the complete other side of authenticity and admiring the way this theme park is spreading a love for history, because everybody is really enjoying the shows, and of course everybody knows that it's not exactly how the Romans did it or how it was going with King Arthur, or but still they find a love of history. And I think that if we can influence kind of the broader public to be interested in history, then we might in the end get more people to visit our museums, and then we can show them that those Romans might have worn something a little bit different, but not exactly what my son is wearing here. But my question is it a problem? Should we do this? Should we try to use this to get more people involved in what we do, so that we can, in the long run, demonstrate our skills and our knowledge as Eva, for example, has and can demonstrate? Well, that's what I wanted to tell you. So.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. That's a complete, also very good story about what you did in Eindhoven. Authenticity is very good, and festivals is also a way, you saw it in Korea, to reach out for bigger public. You do this for Viking festivals, where it attracts a lot of visitors, but most of them are already interesting in the Vikings, and that Hexia was another item. And there's a big advantage for you as well as members of EXARC, an organization of musea, and I think about Berlin as well, because Berlin is a very nice city with a lot of nice places to go out and to feast, to have parties, etc. But there's big advantage to organize festivals like this, also financially, because people buying tickets already 6 months in advance, and the price what they spend for it is quite higher than your normal entrance fee, and they also drink and take beer and etc. Of course, you have to find the middle way of quality and with music, but it is very possible, and we come later on it. First of all, I'd like to go to Annick. Yeah, Björn, please go ahead.
Well, I think this is very interesting, your thoughts about it, because this is actually what I started to talk about when the museum was looking into this. The Skansen in Sweden was the first that had some Samic people with reindeers. But that was the first for reenacting concept in the world. And people were amazed because they could see the Samic people, which was living very up in the north. And then when we were trying then to enjoying or to join this museum world, when we started with it, the empty house that they experimental park, there was lots of saying, no, that's we don't know how it looks like, so we can't put any furniture in there. We can't have any people in we can't do anything of this. You got Dick, this is a lie. We don't know. And we still don't know. But I think that we have, during this time, come to the point where we have made the quality control through all these EU projects we have done. We have been very much worked on how you dress, authenticity, the experimental part, and all these bits and pieces. So we are, shall we say, in the end of the beginning, because now we have made us into a global open air museum. That was the aim we started 30, 40 years ago. We have reached there, but at the same time, to run a business like this, we need the money. So before, in old time, I used to say, we can't make Disneyland. But if you start looking at Disney, see how fantastic they can make a tree with all the blades and everything like that, so it looks like a tree. So it's about the quality. It's about the quality we do talk about. So as long as we are telling the people that it's fantasy or is history, then I think we can control it. But you have to be very, very clear. So you can't mix it. That's the biggest problem you have. When you have, for instance, in Visby in Gotland, they have a medieval week. And that started very nicely in the beginning, but it ended up with people selling plastic swords and helmets and junk. There was a big mix of everything till about 5 or 6 years ago. I think they divided the medieval and the Viking time in two different places in the town. And they started getting a bit control of all these junk sailors from Stockholm coming down with his cloth around them, selling bits and pieces and playing around Vikings or medievals.
Okay, Björn, now Ibrahim, I want to discuss as well. Ibrahim, go ahead, please.
I mean, yes, okay, I'm fine.
I think that's a very important point, is the a separation of these things. So I think both parts have a right to exist. Beautiful and the museums, open air museums with reenactment, with live interpretation, or whatever, or however you want to call it. But you need a clear separation. So you can't do a fantasy event in an open air museum for audiences. So because then the problem is that the people expect one truth, yeah, and so there's a big chance that they mix it totally up. For example, a friend of mine runs an open air museum or open air historic park near to the Czech border called Bernau Tachov, and they have a really good reconstructed buildings from the 7th to the 14th century, and they do a lot of reenactment also in the buildings and so on and so forth. And once a year they have a medieval fair. But this is not, can you hear me, or is it?
Yeah.
But this medieval fair, it is outside of the museum's area. And the people, they are dressed up in fantasy armor and so on and so forth, are not allowed to enter the museum's area. So you have a clear separation what it is supported by research and what is fantasy, and so you attract the people. So what you say, Yvonne, that to open the people's heart for history, and then they can go into the museum and see how our current status of research is or are, and how according to our knowledge, medieval times can be made visible. So, and this is quite a good approach, I think.
Very important to be clear for public what you are presenting and what they expect. They have to expect, and that's very important, of course. Yeah. Samia Castro, you had a question. Please go ahead.
Yes, sorry about that. I think that everyone's made really good points, kind of hammering in kind of the same thing of having a clear narrative and a separation between the historical side, but also engaging with the public for fantasy. But I wanted to go back to the question that Ivana had said, is entertainment more important? And I think entertainment is not more important than authenticity, because there's a reason why we're trying so hard to make sure that all of these things are as authentic as possible, to make sure that there is a clear, distinct interpretation for the open air museums, because so often can these be reinterpreted into kind of fantastical ideologies, and we really don't want that. Coming from experience in the States, where it's quite common, mostly because people like the idea of a fantasy land and the interpretation of history, without really recognizing why that's a bad idea. So I think, Yvonne, for that question, I think entertainment is not more important, but public engagement is as important as authenticity, because we do need the public funds for it. And thank you so much for the presentation.
Ulrike, I agree. You have to be very carefully. Yvonne, you have a response, please?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if I said that entertainment is more important, but I also not quite agree with Ibrahim that you have to really distinguish, like you are only allowed in the museum if you don't come and play. I sometimes think we are too strict. We also think that what we see, our visitors also see, and they don't. I'm convinced that they don't see what we see. So a lot of people don't see the difference between clothing that is handmade or not handmade. We see it, and it's important for us. And we should not say it's handmade when it's not handmade. But don't think that all people have this very clear image. And that's why I mentioned 2 medieval months. I lived for 2 months in the museum in one house, and I talked to more than, well, I don't know if I tortured them, but there were 20,000 visitors in those months. And everybody saw the same picture, and everybody had a completely different response to that. So some people saw a very romantic idea and they wanted to live there as well. And they thought it was the most Zen life you could ever have. Other people saw the most disgusting medieval life, and they saw exactly the same thing. So it's very hard to say there's one public and they all feel the same thing. And yes, as a museum, I think we are obliged to tell as much as we know, but don't make the mistake. And that's actually what Björn says. We have to make the picture bigger than we actually know. We have to fill in so many gaps. We are not nudists. In the Netherlands, it would mean if I want to demonstrate what found in prehistory, that I have naked people with 1 square centimeter cloth on them. So let's be honest about that too, and don't fool ourselves that what we show is completely authentic, because we have so many things that we don't know.
Yvonne, thank you. I first go to Greece, to Athens, I think. Rebecca, you still with us? How is Greece at the moment?
Hi there. Hello, everybody. Yeah, Greece is hot. Thank you, Yvonne, for this. This is such an interesting question, this question of authenticity, because I think once you get into the realm of performance anyway, authenticity is a blurred area, let's say. But I do think there's something in the curation of these events and in the management of those partnerships, so that it doesn't become a reputational risk, the kind of the scope, the creep of that storytelling scope. I don't have the answer for that, but I just wanted to share an example. Historic royal palaces with past pleasures before coronavirus were experimenting with running their own festivals on site. And they chose to go with a very specific moment in history as the theme for the event. So you're here on this day, in this year. And I think that leading with that actually did something to hold together all of the different elements that were taking place and to keep that kind of central thread of this storytelling and research in the middle of that. I think there's probably a really interesting case study in there for anyone who wanted to sort of explore that further. And the other thing I wanted to say was those larger scale sort of commercial events. I wonder if there are many examples from museums of going in as a sort of a mobile kind of offer within that programming, so that there's a voice from researchers, from museums within a larger kind of commercial setup. That's probably quite interesting work as well. Because you're right, it's really interesting. It brings in lots of people. There's lots of enthusiasm. So I guess it's about making sure that the voices of researchers and of curators are in there too. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Charlotte, please go ahead.
Well, I think it's really interesting, but the fear I have is that sometimes when you open to the show or to the main public, to most of public, you will see everywhere quite the same thing, because the difference will be quite thin. And even if we are not in the research of authenticity, because we cannot reach it, because it's really tough to do that, it becomes like beautiful a show through another show. So the main difference between beautiful, which is in France, like where I am actually, is that they have a lot of money. The amount is huge, and they can make a really big difference with the show they can make, which will be very different with historical park. And for us to make the difference, that's a bargain. How can we reach really people, and how can we make them come over? What's the difference we can make?
Okay, thank you. That's right, complete right. As always, if Vilnia, go one more question, then one more response for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I want.
Alright.
Can I say one thing for this question? So, what I actually think is that we should try and get into Pidefu and ask them to stop wearing horns on helmets. And I know, for instance, just one, and I know that it's possible to do so. So maybe that's the way to go. Not try to copy them, but just infiltrate. And I'm starting to do that. From the bottom.
I think they feel a shame if we say it's not authentic, and they will do it immediately. Okay. After this, we go to Aniek. And Aniek is representing the Living History Group, the 2nd Augusta of the Netherlands. And it's a very big group who are traveling all over Europe. They're visiting Karlsruhe and Xante. They were 2 weeks ago, and they go to Basel, and also in Archeon we can have them. But please, Aniek, go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you so much. I'll just attempt to share my screen as well. So please tell me if you see anything.
Yep. Yes, looks good.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, great. So I'm talking to you as a member of the board of the Legio Secunda Augusta Dutch reenactment group. But I'm also an academic. I am a lecturer in ancient history and archaeology at the University of Amsterdam. So my view on reenactment, living history, life interpretation, however you want to specifically call it, is based both from the experience of academia and as a reenactor myself. So a little bit about our Legion. So we're based in the Netherlands. We do approximately 20 plus historical events per year, so that's quite a lot. Jack already mentioned a few. So we go to Archeon. We also go to Yvonne's Prehistorisch Dorp. We go to Kalkriesen and Xanten in Germany and Augusta Raurica in Switzerland. And our group consists of more than 70 members at present, and we're still growing. What's quite unique about our group is that the military and civilian representation within our group is an equal distribution. So we have just as many civilians as we have people reenacting military life. And we also have the rule that if we ever attend a historical event, if we're asked to attend a historical event, and people ask for soldiers, we never only deliver soldiers, we always include the representation of the civilian part of life. Especially in Roman reenactment, this is an element of ancient life that can be overshadowed by the shiny allure of armor. And we seek to represent the whole of life in the Roman world. What's also unique about our group is that we have quite a few members that have a degree in history or archaeology, which is also because of the presence of the University of Leiden, as well as the University of Amsterdam, who have strong history and archaeology programs that a lot of our members have attended. We don't just do shows for the public. We are very, very much focused on an authentic representation of the past through interaction. So we're not supposed to be just seen from a distance. We want to be in dialogue with the visitors to an event. We also cultivate good relations with museums, the film industry, and universities. And a part of that is my role, as I am within the academic world, which has led to a collaboration of members of our society in theses in archaeology in ancient history, specifically related to the presentation of history and heritage management. And we sometimes have the opportunity to actually participate in experimental archaeology. So this year, and this research hasn't been published yet, but there's a blog out at this point, which the member who is holding our banner here participated in a research by the Radboud University as to the length and duration of the use of oil lamps from the Roman period. Now, experimental reconstruction and live interpretation can take many forms, and I'd like to give you an example from my personal experience here. It can be more than what most people associate it with, namely the production of items like pottery and ironworking. So craft. Craft is actually much broader, much wider than the usual suspects. And my own specialization is the creation and reconstruction of Roman hairstyles, which I've had the pleasure of doing at many historical events in the past on members of our own reenactment group. So we have conducted our own continuous experiment in finding out how these hairdos were actually created, how you make them last, and how different varieties of construction can achieve the same result. And I'm hoping to publish on this long series of experimentation soon. What we think as a group is really important about what we do as a reenactment group and what it contributes to the understanding of history is that we humanize the past. These are real people that we put into shoes from 2,000 years ago, armor from 2,000 years ago, and really help to enliven what we all study, what we're all interested in. And this is interesting both for academics, experimental archaeologists, but also, of course, for the public, who get to associate the objects to see in museums and the books that they read with real human beings who cry and laugh and have a life. And that goes for both sides of life in ancient world. So the military side and the civilian side, illustrated here by this wonderful family picture from members of our group. And what it does, it centers human experience in all its variety. And it allows us to engage and represent voices that are usually less prominent in the historical record as we have it. I'm thinking about like 50% of the population, women, but also the more common soldiers. But we don't have a lot of historical or archaeological sources on. So in this sense, live interpretation not only creates a bridge and like makes the past human, but it makes it human in all its diversity of the past, and thus also more relatable to many different types of audiences in our modern world, and hopefully inspire them to be interested in history, something that has been really recurrent in the presentations of today. Now, there's a big couple of hurdles to get over before we can actually achieve the main goals that we want to achieve with live interpretation. Is namely that we need more access to scientific publication. It has already been mentioned tonight. We need open and we need free science. We need people to share what they do. And not to share what they do once they've done it, once it's been published, but while they are producing it. So reenactors, living history people would like to be involved in conferences, in networks like EXARC. And they would like to be collaborating with research institutes like universities, museums, and unaffiliated experimental archaeology research projects. So hereby, I'd like to make a call to everyone listening. Please invite us to your project. Please let us be involved in centralizing that human experience in your research and helping you to present your research to as wide and diverse a public as we can possibly reach. That was it for me. Thank you very much.
You're on mute, Jack.
It goes off. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, that was a nice, good story about the Legio Secret Augusta, which we all love and adore in Archeon. So we had quite a few interesting promotions and ideas about authenticity and festivals. And I'd like to show you two movies. First of all, it's an Australian book writer, John Flanagan. He passed away this last year. And he's writing books about Scandia, and that is Scandinavia. And he has in the Netherlands 20,000 children who are reading his books. He made more than 25 editions following up each other. And the book publicity thought we could go to a Viking festival, and they chose for us in Archeon. And then he came as well as the writer. And the people wrote the books and they are dressed like Vikings. Of course, not authenticity, but they loved the book. And the books were very exciting. And I will show you a short movie about that Great Hunter Day, because that is the name of the book. We are, as a museum, at an open air museum, we have no financial understanding and support from the government or and of any institution. So we are full ourselves financially operating. And we organize this so that all the public knows that is a special weekend for children of the books of John Flanagan. And then they buy tickets as well, etc. And in the winter time, we have always the midwinter fair. That's during Christmas. We are open in the park from April till October. And then we open the Christmas holiday. And then we are an authentic park, but we do not say that we are really authentic. We do step aside. And the midwinter is a very well-known event. It's very special that people realize that it's the longest day. And the Celtic people know about it. And last year we started with the Midsummer, because the Midsummer was on the Saturday morning, and we opened the park at 5 o'clock because at 5:30 there was the sunset. And that Midsummer is a music festival. We have few thousand people coming in. This weekend we have it again. And the special thing is the atmosphere was unbelievable. It was kind, friendly, and really unknown. So I'll find the movie and I'll show you a few moments for it.
Can you say some words in between?
Yes, you do that, please.
And there's a book we did in EXARC, the Open Art project for the management of open air museums. This could be very good for all of you to read it if you haven't read it. It's you can find it on the projects pages on Open Art. and there's all these things that we've been talking about, how to make things authentic. Yes, sir. And quality control.
So come and I go and I start stopping. Always where we friends are. You are all part of me. I'll leave you with this song. Come and I go, it's gonna stop me.
Now you saw something a little bit about it. Excuse me for this because I did it myself. So it's not authentic, but we have craftsmen and people selling things, and they have to be authentic and as possible. And it's a fantasy market as well. But the atmosphere is quite nice, and it brings us what money as well. We have working about around 50 people paid by us, and a few employees as volunteers as well. But it's a very nice weekend, and I can really recommend it for a place like Berlin to organize something like this, because it really gives you a good history, and people will come back for seeing the museum itself. And Eva is playing there as well, I think.
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Because I think all the music you hear is like inspired on Celt music. It's inspired on medieval music. And if you talk about the people who come there, it's the Gothic scene, and they are also inspired on 19th century. They're all inspired by history. So especially when they come to an open air museum, it's for them very interesting to see the real authentic stuff in the back.
Okay, this is there was it. Are there more questions from you? Yvonne, no, not questions anymore?
You know, not really a question, but I think that inspiration what Eva mentions is also very important. And I actually think that although it's for us very important to share this authenticity, it's not up to us to own the past. So if people want to feel inspired and do something with it, they are allowed to do it. And I think it's wonderful that we can have these open air museums that give this ambience, this exactly what Jack is describing. That the people feel so at home. And that was also with Hexia. They felt so at home in the prehistoric village, and they felt like a safe place where they could be themselves. And who are we to deny them that? So if we can do it both, it's wonderful. Yeah.
Björn, I have 3 more minutes for the film of Regia. Do you have?
All right, I'm just gonna say, remember one thing: it can't be boring. It had to be fun at the same time, but there's a balance, you know. Make people enjoy themselves to do.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, see the archery, see the handcraft, see everything, all these bits and pieces. That is the life interpretation, and gives them history the way they want it. Then the step to do, outside the fantasy world. Well, you have anyone seen the film Vikings? I closed it after 2 minutes. That's the worst film I've ever seen. Well, the only thing that didn't have was plastic horn helmet.
Okay, I think this is the end of the night. I think it's 1 hour and 10 minutes. Julia, did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I just had to say a few words, as quite a few of the topics are exactly what we want to talk about in Berlin in November, and I hope to see many of you there. And yes, also challenging these things in my own work in the museum, of course, and some inspiring talks and new ideas and food for thought, definitely. So thank you very much, and goodbye from me.
We meet again to our next evening. It will be in a few months after August, September, November, or October. Then we see you again, and we will invite you. Thank you for all the participants and your attention. Have a good night. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.